Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie and I'm an internal medicine doctor, and I make videos on health, wellness, my life as a doctor, as well as medical education. So if you guys want to hit that subscribe button to follow along, as well as ring the bell so you never miss a video. In today's video, we're going to talk about residency interviews. When a medical student is in their last year of med school, they're going to apply to residency in order to get into their program of choice and in the specialty of choice. In Canada, we call it CARMS, which is the Canadian Resident Matching Service. In the US, I believe they call it ERADS. Hopefully I've said that correctly. This year, things are a little different with the interview process, as they're all going to be on Zoom and they're going to be in the month of March for Canadian medical students. So I thought it'd be a perfect opportunity to go over some tips and tricks that you can use for your interview in order to make it the best possible interview so that you can get matched to your first residency of choice. So let's get started. Firstly, I want to talk about a few questions that I believe every medical student should have a good answer for prior to going into any interview. The first would be, tell me about yourself. The second would be why you want to do that specific specialty. And the third is why you want to go to that school or program. For the first question of tell me about yourself, I always believe that this is a question that you really need to summarize who you are in only a few minutes. And obviously that can be very difficult as you've done a lifetime of learning and getting to that point. How can you just touch on a few points in 1 or 2 minutes to answer that question? So some things that I believe that you should touch on is where you're from, where your background is, because this may be relevant if you are applying to a school that's close to where you grew up. Maybe it's somewhere that you hope to settle down and start a family yourself, or you already have a family. Or maybe it's that you're going to a smaller town and you're from a small town, and therefore there's a lot of similarities that you're aware of and that you can bring from your knowledge of living in a small town to your new place. So having a good idea of where you're from, talking about your interests and things that have led you to where you are today is very important if you can sum that up in 1 or 2 sentences. And then also even bringing up a few unique things about yourself. One thing that's important, especially having several interviews or different Zoom interviews, is that you want to stand out next to the next person. And this may be talking about a unique trait about yourself or extracurricular activity that you've been involved in. I remember talking about my history with music and singing at a very young age and how that was actually talked about quite frequently in my interviews because people were very interested in learning about what I'd done throughout my life. So make sure that you have a few unique things about yourself, that you're able to highlight some extracurriculars that you've done, that you can talk about your family and where you're from and put that into a nice summarized paragraph. Now, I don't believe in memorizing your answers because that's going to sound way too rehearsed, but having a few points of what you'd like to talk about, at least for these specific questions, is very beneficial to help you with your nerves and help you perform the best that you can throughout the interview. For the next questions about why you want that specific specialty, well, I'm sure you've done a lot of self-reflecting on why you want to do that for your career, whether it's internal medicine or family medicine or surgery. These are things that I'm sure you've thought about for your actual application and for all the essays that you've written, but make sure you're able to actually articulate it and talk about it. And what I feel is important is talking about it out loud so that you can actually hear what it sounds like and see if you can fill in any blanks that may be missing information that can help make that person understand why you truly want to do that specialty. And then the third question, which is why you want to go to that school or program, well, make sure you know something very unique about that place. If there's something that that school has that others don't, highlight that in your answer. Show that you've done the research and really truly want to attend that school and that you'd be a good fit for that program because of it. So my next piece of advice would be to go through your resume, go through things that you've done throughout med school, throughout working, throughout your work experience, throughout your volunteer experience, where you've had to deal with different scenarios or situations, because you'll always be asked questions about, tell me about a time where you had to deal with a conflict, or you've had to deal with a difficult patient, or you had to show leadership in some way. And believe it or not, you've had these experiences. You've gone through medical school and you've done university or your undergrad and you've dealt with different people that I know that you've had these experiences, but it's not always easy to articulate them. So what I always did is I wrote down certain things that really stood out for me and that showed who I was as a person. So if it was a leadership experience, I used to sit on a lot of committees and arrange different events for these committees. A time where you had a conflict with a patient or you dealt with a difficult patient. One thing that these questions want to show is not only for you to tell someone about yourself, but to show yourself acting in a specific way. I always believe that showing rather than telling is really going to help that interviewer see what you're like and see what you're like as a person, and then see if they want you in their program. My third recommendation is practice, practice, practice. And you shouldn't just be practicing by, writing things out. As I did say, you have to write them out, but you have to practice saying them and speaking them. And this should be done by either sitting in front of a mirror and actually seeing yourself, or even videoing yourself. Get a camera or use your phone or your computer and see yourself on the screen and actually videotape yourself. By looking at yourself, you're able to see how you sit. Look at your posture. See if you're someone who does a lot of fidgeting and maybe touches their hair a lot, or things that can be distracting that you should try and avoid doing throughout the interview. Make sure you have a good idea of what you're like on camera, because by looking at yourself on camera, you can see what the interviewers are going to see when they see you. And even better, if you can practice with a friend through Zoom or using Zoom, that may help in actually feeling like you're actually going through the steps of an interview. So I think it's great that you can actually practice at home, and that's probably one of the beneficial things of having an interview on Zoom. Next thing I want to talk about is dress code. So this past year, you've probably seen a lot of things on YouTube, and you've probably had your own Zoom meetings, and the whole, you only have to get dressed from the waist up. Well, I believe that if you want to get the part, you better look the part. And what that means is fully dressing from head to toe in your interview clothes. And I call them interview clothes because they're probably clothes you don't always wear. I recommend wearing a nice blouse and a blazer, either a dress skirt or a dress pants, as well as shoes, and so making the entire outfit look presentable, because even though you're not actually attending the interview, you want to feel like you're at an interview so that you can perform in the best possible way. For men, make sure that you're also wearing a dress shirt, tie, blazer, pants. Wear the clothes that you would have worn if you were able to get out there and actually go to that interview. In terms of colors and designs, I always believe in sticking with very professional looking colors. So navy blue, I love that color for a suit or for a blazer. If you have black, that's great too. I would try and avoid super flashy things like plaid and things like that. I know you want to stand out, but you want to stand out with the words that you say, not so much to be the one that stood out because they had a funny looking jacket or something like that. So make sure that you're dressed professionally, appropriately, and fully from head to toe throughout your interview. And finally, let's talk about some Zoom tips for interviews. So when you're on Zoom, it's a very different feeling than if you're actually going to the facility to have the interview. You want to make sure that your video works, your audio works prior to having that interview so that there's no computer issues throughout or on the day of your interview. You want to make sure that your background looks tidy and neat and there's no distracting things in the way. Because there is the old saying that you are basically judged on first impressions in the first 10 seconds of an interview. Well, if your background is all messy, that may reflect on how you are as a person. So make sure that the area that you're doing the interview in is very tidy and neat and clean. Make sure you're in a quiet space. If you're alone in your house, that's great. If there are other people in other rooms, make sure that they know that you're going to be having an interview and to be quiet throughout the interview so that there's no loud noises or distractions. If you have a cell phone, make sure it's off or on silent so that, again, that's not a distraction throughout the interview. Make sure you're maintaining eye contact. So adjust your camera so it's at the level of the eye, because you want to have that eye contact with the interviewer throughout the entire interview. You really want to connect with that person even though it is through video conferencing. If you have pets, as much as I love animals and it's been cute to see your cat walk across the screen, I do not feel that it's cute during an interview. So if you have pets, put them in another room. If you have someone who can take them out of the house, if it's a dog who barks, then do that for the time being of the interview, just because you don't want that to be a distraction of who you are. You usually only have 15, maybe 30 minutes in an interview, and there's a lot to cover and a lot to get through, and you don't want to be that person who has all these distracting elements in the way, because that's going to take away from them getting to know you. So these are some of my strategies and advice for your upcoming Zoom interviews. You can also use these for any type of Zoom interview, whether it's a job interview or an interview for school. It's not always related to residency. In the end, a lot of these questions are asked several times throughout your life, and once you get into the role of how to answer them, it's going to become easier and easier depending on whichever job you're faced with. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Comment down below if you have any other questions about residency or medical school or medicine in general. I'd be happy to answer them. Make sure you subscribe to my channel to follow along for more videos, as well as hit that notification bell so you don't miss my next video. I hope you guys are having a great start of the year. It's been a long one with the pandemic, but I know that if we stick together, we will get through it. I hope you guys are staying healthy, being happy, and I'll see you on the next one.